Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Saturday, January 20th. I hope wherever you are, you're trying to stay warm. I'll tell you a secret. I'm down in Florida, but it's not that warm. Well, if I say the temperature, you guys are going to throw things at me if you could hit the screen, but it's not like it's a nice day. I'll put it that way, but it's not the crazy weather we've been getting up northeast that I watch on the tube, and I hear people call me and they say, "Oh my God, it's freezing." I can even see my house and the Ring camera and see the snow coming down, and I'm like, "Wow, I'm glad I'm in FLA, Florida." Yes, I'm glad I'm here. Anyway, folks, this story with Alec Baldwin, we covered this story a great amount of time on a lot of shows on this, and I thought it was over with. I thought that it was going to go the way of a civil case, and Alec Baldwin and the Rust Film Company would be sued, and they would part with money. But now it's still criminal. Alec Baldwin was just indicted for manslaughter, and we're going to take a dive into that because I have a great guest with me today, of course, the great professor, retired NYPD sergeant, and lawyer, Professor Mike Geary. And we're going to discuss it. We're going to break down manslaughter and what it means. But I'm still a little baffled as to the why. Why they're still pushing this, because there's so many reasons. And of course, what the most important thing is about this is that woman on the screen right there, Helena Hutchins, who was the cinematographer who was shot in the chest by a gun that was supposed to be unloaded. That's the old thing that people teach you when you first learn about firearms is there is no such thing as an unloaded gun, So never point it at someone and pull the trigger and say, "Oh, it's unloaded," because something surprising may happen, as happened in this case. And then we're going to talk about, is there negligence in this case? And at what level? And how many levels of negligence were there? Who was negligent? How many people were negligent? Was the trigger pulled? It's like, we'll get into that. I get a little crazy with this case because, there are so many different areas of this case, and we're going to discuss it. But first of all, anyway, guys, hang on to your seats because you're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. Welcome aboard.
There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Glider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Folks, we're back. Police off the cuff. So, really what this case revolves around is an actor, namely Alec Baldwin, shooting the cinematographer by accident. I will acknowledge from minute one that there is no way Alec Baldwin meant to do this. Can that still make it criminal? There was no intent. He had no intent to shoot Helena Hutchins. No intent whatsoever. But can it still be criminal? Yeah, you bet. It sure can. And in numerous ways it can be criminal. And the intent of, intentionally here does not exist. But several other things do. So to talk about several other those aspects of the law, I'm going to bring on with me retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Mike Geary. Mike, welcome.
Hey, Billy. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on. Good
So it's
afternoon,
great
everyone.
to have you, Mike, and I always love your courtroom look behind you because it's apropos for this show today. So on the Rust movie set, there's the picture of Rust. It's apropos that the sign is right side up and upside down at the same time because that sort of is a metaphor for how this set was. You know, the set of this movie, right side up and upside down at the same time. Mike, when we talk about, what I first want to do is, I want to read something from the New York Times. And this came out just yesterday, right? Just yesterday. A grand jury in New Mexico indicted Alec Baldwin on Friday on a charge of involuntary manslaughter, reviving the criminal case against him in the fatal shooting of a cinematographer, who we know as Helena Hutchins, on the set of the film Rust, which was shot, of course, in New Mexico. More than 2 years ago, when a gun he was rehearsing with went off. I hate that. I despise that. Why does the New York Times not just admit he pulled the trigger? It did not go off. Guns just do not go off. It drives me out of my mind. It's like, it's so dishonest. The gun he was holding went, no, it did not go off. He pulled the trigger.
Yeah, Billy, the NYPD test. We've done this many times with automatics, with revolvers. They've dropped them from a second floor window in testing to make sure that these guns are the ones that are good on the street. Make sure they're reliable. Guns just don't go off. You have to pull the trigger, and therefore, doesn't matter if it's an automatic, doesn't matter if it's a revolver, doesn't matter if it's older or a newer model, you have to pull the trigger. That's how they're designed to work. They don't work any other way. And for them, the New York Times, to sit there and say the gun went off without saying Mr. Baldwin pulled the trigger, maybe he really wasn't paying attention. Maybe he wasn't aware of the fact he was pulling the trigger, but he was pulling the trigger. His finger was on that trigger and the finger was pulling it back. And it was some little bit of pressure against his finger. We don't know if it's like an 8-pound pull or 10-pound pull or whatever on the trigger, but he did it. Why they would do that is ridiculous. That should never have gotten past the editor. That should have been fixed and made factually accurate. What they did is dishonest. It's disingenuous. I don't know why, but it's disingenuous to the reader.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you know something, Mike, I'll be the first one to say, look, it's neither here nor there what we feel about Alec Baldwin,
right?
Whether we like him, whether we dislike him, or whether the listening audience likes him or dislikes him. He's, happens to be a brilliant actor. He's not as much a brilliant human being, but that shouldn't come into play with whether or not they prosecute him. And as I said, I think it's almost too late to prosecute him. I mean, there was a lot of negligence on this case, but then doesn't this case now, is it really still criminal? I think that perhaps his posture and his failure to take responsibility for this perhaps is one of the reasons he's being prosecuted now. And then if that's the reason, that's not a good reason either, because what we're talking about is justice. And if he would have totally admitted, yes, I pulled the trigger, I was negligent, this went wrong, that went wrong, would he be looking at a manslaughter charge right now in January of 2024?
Billy, probably not. There's no discussion or no conflict over what the series of events was. It was Mrs. Gutierrez, Hannah Gutierrez. She was the armorer. She was the one who loaded the bullets into the firearm, physically did that. She handed the firearm to a gentleman named Mr. David Halls, and he said the gun is cold, meaning that it was unloaded when he handed it to Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin was then practicing the scene. So we know the chain of events. and after the tragedy happened, and it was a loaded bullet in that gun, at least one, and it killed Mrs. Hannah and Hannah Hutchins. Helena Hutchins. I'm sorry, Helena Hutchins. Um, he probably, like a lot of other people, would be in shock. I can't believe I did this. Oh my God. I didn't pull the trigger. And that's fine for a few minutes, and that's fine. But to then repeat it time and time again, I think he lost a lot of respect from people. I think if he had just said, look, I I did it. I can't believe I did it. I didn't mean to ever hurt anybody. I wasn't even thinking I was pulling the trigger. I was concentrating on other things, and blah 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 blah. He may have escaped criminal liability completely if he had just done that and acknowledged what had happened, but he didn't. He stonewalled, and he created a lot of maybe political pressure on the district attorney and the local prosecutor to say, well, wait a minute, this guy is not even acknowledging any sort of guilt whatsoever. We have to force him to do that, and so they're going after him. I think this should have been settled a long time ago. This should not be happening now at this time, no matter what you feel about Alec Baldwin personally. Not at all. This has gone way too far.
Fire Opal from the chat. Live ammunition on set is surely to blame here, not whether Alec is an arrogant SOB or not. Spoiler, he is. Fire Opal, I agree with you 50% maybe. Right. There shouldn't be live rounds on the set. However, if there's a knife laying around and someone stabs someone, are we going to blame the knife? No, he has to take a certain amount of responsibility. And what the term that we will use, and the term Professor Geary is going to explain after I slap it right on him right now, is something called due caution.
Yeah, Billy, he has what they call due caution, due diligence, wherever you are. Remember, he's on this case. It's a little bit different from any other kind of accident on set, because it's actually his film. It's his production company. He hires everybody. He pays everybody. So he's, you're looking to hire the best people you can, but stay on a budget. And he may have cut some corners in terms of safety. And so therefore, and unfortunately, this has come back to bite him, but he is ultimately responsible for what goes on in that set, because he's not just the actor. He's actually the person in charge of everything. Set construction. If a beam falls and hits somebody, yeah, okay, he didn't himself construct the set, but he's the person who's hired a firm to construct the set, to do all this stuff. So there is some, tangential responsibility on his part. But yeah, he perhaps, in order to save some money, really skipped a little bit on the quality, and he didn't do his due diligence, his due caution. And unfortunately, we end up with a death.
Absolutely. And in addition, I also want to mention the gentleman to the right on the screen is Joel Souza, a movie producer on the film of Rust, who, when the round actually went through the chest of Helena Hutchins, it exited out her back and hit Joel Souza in the shoulder, causing a pretty serious physical injury, a gunshot wound to his shoulder. So,
yeah.
Civilly, there is a lot of people suing Alec Baldwin. And I want to just get back quickly to the New York Times article talking about the indictment, which just occurred actually a year from the previous indictment, which was thrown out
right
January 19th, 2023. That indictment was thrown out. I guess there was a lot of things wrong with that indictment. And most people thought that the criminal case at that point was over with, including myself. The indictment, which came exactly 1 year after the first involuntary manslaughter case against him was announced, was the latest reversal of fortune for Mr. Baldwin. The local district attorney's initial case fell apart, and the initial charge against Mr. Baldwin was dismissed in April. But a new prosecution team, Carrie T. Morrissey and Jason J. Lewis, decided to present the case to a grand jury, which indicted Mr. Baldwin on Friday. In New Mexico, an involuntary manslaughter conviction on charges like the one Mr. Baldwin faces can carry up to 18 months in prison. We look forward to our day in court, Mr. Baldwin's lawyers, Luke Nikas and Alex Spiro, said in a statement on Friday. Mr. Baldwin, who both starred in and was a producer of Rust, a Western, has maintained that he was not responsible for the death of the cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, saying that he was told the gun did not contain any live rounds, that there was not supposed to be any live ammunition at all on the set. He has also maintained that he did not pull the trigger when the gun fired, although a forensic report commissioned by the prosecution determined that he must have pulled the trigger for it to go off, contributing to the decision to revive the criminal case. So, interesting. Yeah. However, I think this case, and I'm not a prosecutor, I'm a cop, former cop. I think it's unprosecutable. I really do. Because the gun that is the gun that caused the death of Helena Hutchins and a serious physical injury to Joel Souza has been tested so many different times, has changed hands. The chain of custody in itself could create doubt. And the fact that they're also reporting that the gun fell apart, they had to get new parts. How is that okay? I think that the prosecution will have a very difficult time to prosecute this case with all those facts and circumstances being the reality. Mike.
Billy, you're right about the firearm. Yeah, if that wasn't safeguarded from moment one when the police first got there with the ambulance, and I think they were pretty far out in the desert. It took a while to get somebody there for poor Mrs. Hannah. But yeah, you've got that issue. Okay, who touched that gun afterwards? Was it put into a voucher? An invoice? Did it get lost? Was it dropped? Maybe damaging it. You got to worry about that. Then you have to worry about well, they close off the crime scene like they would normally. I remember seeing pictures of that. But you also have the issue of several people touching the firearm and handing it to Alec. You've got the armorer. She's the one who actually put at least one live round into that gun from a box of what she thought were blanks. Now, she is also herself filed a lawsuit against the person who supplied the box of bullets to her. But she handled that gun. She hands it to Mr. David Halls, and she probably said, "Okay, we're all set." He hands it to Alec and says, "Okay, it's a cold gun." Everybody's relying on the armorer, and perhaps there's she should have noticed a difference in bullets. I'm not sure, but you've got one criminal conviction already. Mr. Halls has actually pled guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon, and he also then he agreed and to do that, and he then got a deal. He pled guilty and he agreed to testify against Alec Baldwin in any future criminal action. So if beyond the armorer, who I think is number one responsible, the most responsible, and you do it in descending order, the armorer, then Mr. Halls, and then Alec Baldwin, because he didn't load it up himself, that sort of thing. And so therefore you've got him getting a firearm that he's told it's cold meaning it's just loaded with blanks. I think this should have ended a long time ago with both Ms. Gutierrez and Mr. Halls pleading to something, and then Alec Baldwin, I could see civil lawsuits against him because obviously you've got his production company who hired everybody and is ultimately responsible for the safety of everybody there. But I don't see this. I don't see this at all.
I agree with you, Mike. I agree with you.
Because on this day, January 19th last year,
it won't behave. This is the date last year when he was indicted, and now they're re-indicting him a year later for the same charges. Of course, my computer's not cooperating, or the Wi-Fi is not cooperating. So Alec Baldwin, they're reinstituting the charges, the manslaughter charges, and he's being retried. Let me remove that.
Okay. Charged him with manslaughter in that movie set shooting that killed the cinematographer. They eventually actually decided to drop the charges. That happened a couple months ago. And then came today.
So they dropped the charges and then reinstitute them.
It again on
Yeah.
the very same day.
Okay.
They charged Alec Baldwin for the shooting for a second time. What is with January 19th? He is again.
All right, that's enough. They're recharging him. We mentioned that. I think it's not prosecutable. I really don't think they can prosecute him. I really don't. Your thoughts?
Billy, when you look at this and you look at the timeline, and you've got the October 2006, 2021 shooting. Okay, then you've got you got a special prosecutor named Andrea Reeb announced that that everyone on board, Baldwin, Gutierrez, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, and David Halls were negligent. And then she announced that they would all face involuntary manslaughter charges. Then you've got the charges officially filed, in January 2023. You've got April 2023, charges are dropped. The district attorney named Carmack Altweiss. You've got Andrea Reeb. They both leave. And then you have a state attorney general take over the case named Carrie Morrissey back in spring of 2023. And then you get the grand jury convened in October 2023, and you have the indictment now in January 2024. There's something political going on. I hate to say that, but this isn't being handled any way, shape, or form that I would ever expect in, say, the New York City Police Department. I think there's something going on behind the scenes, and there's something going on in the prosecutor's office, special prosecutor, just state attorney, and the fact that it's Alec Baldwin. If this was Alex Jones and he was a carpenter and he lived in the Bronx, this would have been settled within 3 weeks. I don't see this. There's something really bad going on behind the scenes, and I think the public has really done a disservice. And I think there's been a disservice to everyone, the victim's family and Mr. Baldwin and the public. I don't see this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Mike.
Actor has been indicted in New Mexico on.
So he's been indicted in New Mexico for the second time.
Right.
The same case. Just incredible. I'm going to remove that. I'm so annoyed with my Wi-Fi here.
Yeah.
I had it fixed twice, but it still keeps doing it. So, Mike, one of the things I wanted to talk about, because it's very important, and you did a little workup on it, is the charge of manslaughter.
Right.
And I'm going to put it up on the screen. The statute of manslaughter in New Mexico. We'll put it up on the screen right now. I think we could make it large enough so everyone can see it. There we go.
Yeah.
In New Mexico, manslaughter is defined as the unlawful killing of a human being without malice. It is divided into two sections. Voluntary manslaughter consists of manslaughter committed upon a sudden quarrel or in the heat of passion. Whoever commits voluntary manslaughter is guilty of a third-degree felony. The penalty for voluntary manslaughter is 15 years in prison. Involuntary manslaughter consists of manslaughter committed in the commission of an unlawful act not amounting to a felony or in the commission of a lawful act which would produce death in an unlawful manner or without due caution and circumspection.
Right.
Note, involuntary manslaughter may also consist of death resulting from the actor acting in a reckless manner which causes death. Whoever commits involuntary manslaughter is guilty of a fourth-degree felony. The penalty for involuntary manslaughter is 10 years in prison. Alec Baldwin is facing involuntary manslaughter charges in New Mexico in the October 6, 2021 fatal shooting of Helena Hutchins. Miss Helena Hutchins died of her injuries, and another employee, a film producer, Joel Souza, director, was wounded. Mr. Baldwin pulled the trigger of a .45 caliber Colt revolver that he thought was loaded with blanks, fake bullets, while filming a scene in the movie. Miss Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the movie's on-set armorer, is also facing the same charge as Baldwin. it was her responsibility that all firearms used in the movie were loaded properly with blanks and working properly. She handed the gun to Mr. David Halls, who actually handed the firearm to Mr. Baldwin, saying cold gun to indicate the gun used in the scene being filmed was loaded with blanks. Mr. Halls pled guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon and has agreed to testify against Mr. Baldwin and Miss Gutierrez Reed. So, very well explained in that little workup you did. But one of the things that we also have to realize here is that not only did Alec Baldwin pull the trigger here, he wasn't just holding the gun in his hand and it went off the way the New York Times said. He pulled the trigger, and he was a movie producer. So therefore, his role on that movie was not just as an actor, but it was he was management.
Right.
So therefore, he was in charge of, or partly responsible for, the safety of that set, which he took absolutely zero responsibility for. Mike.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem, is that, and maybe that was the first thing in a long series of events. Like if you take dominoes and you stack, put 100 of them in a row, and you hit the first one, that was something that I think led to the last domino going down. And in this case, it would be the actual pulling the trigger of the firearm that actually has a loaded round in it. He was a production manager. He was a producer. His people built the sets. His people hired, everyone, and he did it on a budget. And I'm sure everybody's trying to cut corners, but he began the chain of events that led to the girl, Hannah, being shot in the chest, and the guy Joe being hit in the shoulder. No doubt about it. Now, it's one thing to say, okay, you are actually realistically, you are logically responsible. You look at all the sets of dominoes, all the things that have gone on. However, it's different question. Are you criminally liable for the ultimate destruction of what has happened? Because remember, he's actually started out hiring everybody, but he's also one of the people who, in that row of dominoes, I hate to use that analogy, but he's actually one of the dominoes who actually, pulled the trigger. And the person before him was a domino, and the person before that was a domino. So they're all going down in the same line. And therefore, if you just changed one thing in that whole set from the time he started this, hiring everybody and building the sets to that fatal shooting, if you changed one factor, you may not have had this sort of thing happen. But he is ultimately responsible. Now, he's been sued civilly. He's settled with a whole bunch of people.
Mike, don't go there yet. I want to go there, and I want to talk about that, but I want to go in a sort of an ascending order here. I just want to play a little bit of this. This was actually from a show we did last year.
Did blame over the death of his wife, Helena.
I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
But watching him, I just felt so angry. Just so angry to see him talk about her death so publicly in such a detailed way, and then to not accept any responsibility after having just described killing her.
He said essentially he felt grief but no guilt.
Almost sounds like he was the victim. And hearing him blame Helena in the interview and shift responsibility to others and seeing him cry about it, I just feel like, are we really supposed to feel bad about you, Mr. Baldwin?
So do you think that the majority of the blame lays on Alec Baldwin?
The idea that the person holding the gun, causing it to discharge, is not responsible is absurd to me. Every individual who touches a firearm has a responsibility for gun safety. But gun safety was not the only problem on that set. There were a number of industry standards that were not practiced, and there's multiple responsible parties.
The suit, which alleges at least 15 safety practices were disregarded on set, claims there was a wider culture of cost-cutting that ultimately led to Helena's death. In a statement, Baldwin's attorney says any claim that Alec was reckless is entirely false.
So Amazing. I thought so. But one of the things, look, that we did that on our show over a year ago. That gentleman is Matthew Hutchins, the husband
Right.
of Helena Hutchins, who was quite upset that Alec Baldwin took no responsibility for pulling the trigger and for killing his wife. It was almost like it was someone's fault, but I know it wasn't mine. I find that so reprehensible as almost can't even talk about it. But here's the point. After this occurred, and after all these lawsuits were filed against Alec Baldwin and the Rust movie set, which some of them are still pending, reportedly, he paid off Matthew Hutchins,
Yes.
the husband of Helena Hutchins. And, a lot of figures were thrown out there, $12 million, $14 million, and hired him to be a movie producer so they could finish the film Rust. I thought that was also a bit reprehensible. Like, first of all, how do you settle? And I don't understand, Mike, and maybe you can explain this. How does a civil suit get settled before the criminal case even goes to trial? Isn't that sort of putting the horse behind the cart?
Billy, yeah, it is rather strange. Usually, if there's someone has, caused another person's death and the family is going to sue the actor, the victim's family is going to sue the actor, they're going to wait until after the criminal case is over. The district attorney is going to ask them, please do not engage in any sort of civil litigation with this person until we finish our criminal action. And that's how it normally goes. To have this settlement, civil settlement beforehand, no matter what it is, 1 million or 15 million, it looks like, from my point of view, what I'm thinking is, Mr. Baldwin's attorneys did this, settled the suit, gave him some money, hired him as a director. As a producer on the set, and then also had him sign probably a non-disclosure agreement. That's my guess. And that's what, if I was advising Mr. Baldwin as his attorney, that's what I would do. As reprehensible as it may be, I would have to hire him. I would have to advise him. It's in your best interest to get that gentleman to keep quiet. But yeah, it's really very uncommon for that to happen.
Debbie, every time I pull up your comments, I see Freddie Mercury from Queen. I love Freddie Mercury, but I'm like, it doesn't fit the name Debbie Carroll. Sergeant Bill and Professor, I heard yesterday when authorities tested the gun, they broke it. Now they're getting a similar gun for when it comes to trial. I find that no good. No good. I think any judge will say, that's not reliable. You can't test a different gun that's like this gun and say that's the gun. I really believe, Mike, that this charges are going to be thrown out. I really do.
Yeah, it's a cluster freak is what's going on here. You have the police, the ballistics people testing the firearm, and they break it. Could you imagine what would have happened to you in the NYPD or me? You as a detective sergeant, me as a sergeant on patrol. If I picked up the gun and I dropped it while I'm handing it to you and it busts, This
but
is
Mike,
ridiculous.
something. How many times do they have to test it though? How many?
Right.
They tested it. They said you can't fire this unless you pull the trigger once. What do they keep playing with it for? Leave it alone. You tested it. It fired. Boom. End of story.
You put
Why
it.
do you keep playing with the
gun?
gun?
Right. You put it in the shelf and you leave it there until the trial. It's awful. And it actually, if I'm his criminal attorney, I'm going to jump up and down about this. You're depriving him of his right to due process because he can't challenge that. The gun is damaged. The gun has been altered.
Like the first thing his attorney is going to say is, "May we examine the gun before the jury, Your Honor?" Sorry, it's broken. It's not. End of story. The case is thrown out.
Yeah, it's horrible. This is horrible. What's gone on is it's total. I don't know. I'm going to say the word incompetence because this is not factually a difficult case to either try or make a decision on, dismiss, or whatever you want to do. But this has gone on way too long. Too many people have been involved in it, You break the gun. This is like the Keystone Cops kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
The film's director, Joel Souza. Baldwin recognized the object as a live bullet, and he finally began to comprehend what had transpired on the set of Rust that day, he said. He was shocked. I find that shocking that anyone would believe that's when he finally realized it, that she was dead and that she was shot.
This is on set.
I open it, I show it to the person I'm pointing it to, we show it to the crew, everybody knows. And maybe Alec did that. Hopefully he did do that. But the problem is, dummies are tricky because they look like real bullets.
Had 2 people accidentally shot. Last month's shooting on the set of Rust claimed the life of cinematographer Helena Hutchins and wounded director Joel Souza. The gun actor Alec Baldwin used in the fatal shooting was said to be cold, meaning it wasn't supposed to be loaded with live ammunition. Clooney had his own critiques of what happened on set, down to the phrasing.
I've never heard the term cold gun. I've never heard that term. Literally, they're just talking about stuff I've never heard of. Yeah, it's just infuriating.
Expert armorers beg to differ, saying cold gun is an industry standard term and a normal part of on-set safety checks.
That is something that is always used. Hot gun, cold gun. That's the way we do it. That's the way it's been done for years. If he hasn't heard it, then he's been living under a rock for the last 30 years.
The Rust shooting has drawn swift backlash from other big names in Hollywood and has spurred investigations and lawsuits. Some have even called to end the use of weapons on set completely, but armorers still insist there is a safe way to use them.
Clooney went on to say that he doesn't know Alec Baldwin well, but that he doesn't believe anyone had any bad intentions here. He did say it's important that filmmakers hire people with more experience moving forward.
You know, amazing. Saying that was again from the Police Off the Cuff show,
right,
over a year ago. And as we said on that show, and we've said previously, is that there was no malice here. This was absolutely an accident. However, there is still criminal liability in regards to accidents, as we just displayed by going over the statute of manslaughter. Mike.
Right. Yeah. In New York, I'll just use New York as, for instance, we talk about manslaughter. It's reckless conduct. It's when you understand that there is a danger and you intentionally act anyway in the face of a known danger, and someone is injured or or killed, or there's some sort of damage done. So, that's acting in the face of a known danger. Criminally negligent homicide in New York is when you fail to perceive the danger, and your failure to perceive the danger is so ridiculously idiotic that anyone else in the world with a brain would have seen the danger and understood the danger. And so therefore you're totally ignorant of any sort of danger when you should be aware of danger. So those are the two terms, reckless and criminal
negligence.
Yeah. And this is the latter, saying he in some ways, if you look at the statute, it does kind of include the elements of recklessness in the manslaughter charge. And so it's a weird kind of example of a statute that you wouldn't see in New York. But no one's saying he intentionally did it. No, but he should have taken responsibility. He said, yes, the armorer loaded it. He handed it to me. He said, it's a cold gun, and I pulled the trigger. It's a horrible thing to be responsible for her death, and he should have just owned up to it right off the bat. He peed off a lot of people by saying, I don't know who's to blame for this, but it's not me.
Pathetic.
Yeah,
Leslie M from the chat. The prop person who managed that weapon and handed it to Baldwin is the one who should be charged. Come on, people. It's embarrassing, this carrying on. No, I disagree with you, Leslie. I believe that she is culpable. Yes. Could she be charged with manslaughter also? But I think the person that pulls the trigger is ultimately the person who is the most culpable for this. And let's add another layer to that on Mr. Baldwin. He was one of the film's producers. That adds another layer of responsibility. And it's already been reported that they were acting fast and loose with the safety on this set.
Yeah, Billy, there is allegations, and this film production company did settle for about $100,000 that they actually violated some safety protocols. You know, Ms. Gutierrez, Hannah Gutierrez, absolutely, she should have been much more aware of what she was doing. Testing that box randomly. You know, bullets were only a couple of, $1 each, not even. That sort of thing. And been more careful. So she does bear some responsibility. So does Mr. Reed Halls, who actually already pled guilty. And also Alex also has some responsibility, criminal responsibility too, as you say. Do I want to say who's got the most? It's going to be either the armorer or Alec, and Alec is the one who ultimately pulled the trigger. But there's so many things that went wrong here on this set. It was an amalgam of idiocy that culminated in him pulling the trigger and killing Ms. Halls. So,
Mike, I love your lawyerly words. Amalgam of idiocy. That's a first. I've never heard that before.
I just made that up on the spot. Killing Mrs. Hutchins. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hutchins. Yeah.
So Leslie M, I'd like to read and mention what you said. Absolutely not. Why would Baldwin, for any reason, think there was a real bullet in that gun? Well, it's part of due diligence to check. And other actors that regularly fire guns in movie productions, one of them, George Clooney, said that he checks the gun. That's part of the responsibility of the person being handed that gun, is for them. Look, in 27 years in law enforcement, when you go to the firing range, and granted, there was not supposed to be a live round in this gun, but there's an expression, or there's a phrase, a sentence that the range officers use every single time you shoot. And they say, do a visual and physical inspection of your firearm before you holster it to make sure it's empty. So a visual and physical. What would be so hard to say that to an actor? Before you work with this gun, do a visual and physical inspection of it to see, that there's no live round in it. Would that be too much to ask? Well, someone's life was lost because of the gross negligence, and another person was shot because of this negligence. So I don't think it's too much to ask.
Reversal in actor Alec Baldwin's fatal shooting case on the set of his movie Rust. For the second time, Baldwin is facing charges in the 2021 shooting death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. A New Mexico grand jury has indicted him on involuntary manslaughter charges. Special prosecutors say they received new analysis of the gun used in the shooting. Jonathan Vigliotti has the latest.
Alec Baldwin once again facing involuntary manslaughter charges for his handling of a gun on the set of the movie.
So, facing involuntary manslaughter charges twice in a year. Last year, of course, the charges were dropped, but they've been reinstituted by two fresh district attorneys, two new district attorneys that have chosen to go forward with this. And as Professor Mike and I have said, I don't think this case is winnable. I think it's unprosecutable. And, don't accuse me for liking Alec Baldwin. I don't. But that has nothing to do with it. This is about justice. And I don't think they have a proper case to go forward with. The gun, the evidence in itself is falling apart. And if they wanted to proceed with the tests they've already done, the FBI ballistics people tested this and said, the gun's operable. It fired. Therefore, it fired that day. It's the same gun. But now they're talking about if it's true, the gun fell apart. How are you supposed to present as evidence a gun that's now inoperable? Mike.
Yeah, Billy, as a district attorney, why would you even want to even attempt to go into court in front of a judge in some sort of pretrial motion, about the evidence and presenting the evidence that's going to happen at trial? I can't imagine telling the judge, yeah, Your Honor, and here's our plastic bag with the gun in it. It's an evidence bag, and the gun's broken. How did it happen? Well, we broke it. Yeah, but we want to present it to the jury. I could not imagine ever doing that as a district attorney. I'm thinking there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and I'm even shocked when you heard George Clooney's voice. He had never heard of the term cold or hot. Um, and that makes you kind of wonder, why would he say that when it seems to be a perfectly normal, term used in Hollywood? So there's so many other things going on behind the scenes. Maybe there's a lot of political pressure. Maybe Alec Baldwin brought it on himself by not just acknowledging to everyone that he was part of the death here, and saying, this poor lady, nobody ever meant her harm whatsoever. We were all just we were just going our own way, doing everything like we normally do, and I pulled the trigger on a live round, and I'm sorry, and that would have gone a long way. But there's so many things going on behind the scenes. I
Something
don't think
let me
it's
just
winnable.
mention also, I think clearly in Hollywood, based on what a lot of people, there's not an industry standard. And there's a problem with that. There needs to be an industry standard in the handling of firearms on set and other, how about pyrotechnics? How about just like on the police department, every single encounter you could have with a human being is defined in a patrol guide or an administrative guide that is thousands of pages long. Doesn't the handling of firearms on a movie set at the very least need to be defined so that a would-be movie producer doesn't say, oh, well, what are the procedures for this? There's the procedures, and they should be defined. And the safety measures, they should be defined by not just Hollywood, but by the local law enforcement criteria that works. Look, in New York City, they have a unit called the movie TV unit.
Yes. Yeah.
And they work with the movie directors and producers on what is legally acceptable in New York City in regards to the handling of firearms and in regards to administrative codes and all of that other stuff. That has to be defined in every state in the union, and every place that Hollywood or any other would-be director or producer shoots a movie.
Yeah, Billy, if you remember, like I remember in the 4.6 and the 3.0, if there's a stanchion behind the desk where the sergeant sat, if you wanted to load or unload your gun in that police precinct, you had to walk over to that stanchion and point your gun into that open pipe that went down from like 3 feet high all the way down to the floor. It was very heavy duty metal, and you'd unload or load your firearm there. That was a firearm loading and unloading safety station. If you can't even have something like that, a common sense thing like that on set, if that was there, then you could have had the armorer, Ms. Gutierrez. She could have put in the bullets, even if she thought they were all absolutely harmless. She could have test fired 1 or 2 right there, and then if there was a mistake, you may have discovered it right then and there. She would have fired a round, a 45 round, and scaring the crap out of everybody into that stanchion, and none of this would have happened. But you're right. There is, it's left up to a bunch of people who are making it up by the seat of their pants based on how much money they have to spend on this sort of thing. And that is negligent. Let's face it, that is negligent.
Yes, there was a lot of shortcuts taken. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, and share us with your friends and family. Our perspective is from a law enforcement perspective, and we sort of know the direction that we want to take in a case like this. And we can sort of see this case as what it is. And at this point, I right early on in this case, I thought that Alec Baldwin should absolutely be prosecuted for this because I felt there was a lot of negligence. I still feel there's a lot of negligence, but I just feel now the case is unwinnable. So why are they going about it? And let's this case will proceed forward civilly. And look, he's already paid out X amount of dollars to Matthew Hutchins. It was reported 12 to 14 million. I don't know the exact amount. So that is admitting liability. That is admitting negligence. And we question, why would they solve or why would they settle the civil case before the criminal case? Well, at some point, it didn't look like there was going to be a criminal case. But now it seems like they're going forward. They're moving forward the criminal case, which I predict, and I think Professor Mike agrees with me, and probably a lot of you guys in the chat agree, the case is going to be thrown out. This case is unwinnable for the prosecution because of the evidence. The number one piece of evidence, the gun, is now you can't change parts in a gun and then have the jury say, oh, yes, this is the gun the way it was. No, you can't do that. That's almost like, it's almost like tampering with evidence, Mike.
Yeah, Billy, you've got two people who would be the most important right here. You've got three people. You've got Joel Souza, who was right on set, standing really right pretty much behind the cinematographer, Ms. Hutchins. You've got Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who's the armorer, and you got Mr. David Halls. Mr. Halls already pled guilty, so he's going to testify against Baldwin. And and there's no, he hasn't had a civil suit with Baldwin. You got Gutierrez, she's suing someone else, but they're still free to talk to the prosecutor about what happened. Ms. Hale Hutchins' husband, he may be under a non-disclosure order, so he would not be able to sit there and talk about maybe some of the recklessness that went on, if there was recklessness beforehand on set that maybe his wife had told her, because it's hearsay, and he wouldn't have any ability to speak. But I'm thinking maybe they're looking for some sort of admission of guilt by him, some sort of just plea, and they would give him some sort of probation or some sort of lifetime probation or something. But I think that's what they're going after. They want to salvage something very badly from this case, because maybe they're embarrassed that it's taken so long and that one of the previous charges was actually dropped. So it could be they're trying to save a little face here, but maybe just see if they can eke out an admission of guilt from Mr. Baldwin. That's what I'm thinking of. They would settle for, I think, anything right now, any sort of criminal conviction on Alec Baldwin, no matter what it is.
Mike, here we have a picture up on the screen of the actual interior of the church where Helena Hutchins was shot, where they were shooting the scene, and where Joel Souza took the round in his shoulder. I wouldn't feel any pleasure in seeing Mr. Baldwin go to prison or jail. I really wouldn't. I think clearly this was an accident. Was there negligence? Yes, but it was an accident. I have no doubt he did not mean to the outcome of what occurred. Did he pull the trigger? 100% he pulled the trigger. And anyone that says the gun went off, they're just being disingenuous. They know nothing about firearms. He pulled the trigger, but he did not expect there to be a live round in that gun. So there's other things we got to talk about. Well, whether he expected it or not, he didn't check. There was loose safety standards on this set. The armorer was inexperienced. She should have never been the armorer. And guess why they hired her? Because it was cut rate. She was cheaper than a really experienced armorer. David Halls, this picture up on the screen right now. He was like the assistant director or producer. It has to be defined who's allowed to handle firearms. He was handling the firearms. I thought it was only the job of the armorer. So, as we said earlier, there needs to be procedures that are clearly defined on who, what, where, how, and when can handle firearms on a movie set. And clearly, in this instance, there wasn't.
And that's negligence, and that led to the death of Hannah. And so therefore, whenever I always talk to my students about this, whenever you've got a crime is this serious as this, there's you got the person is dead. You've got to now figure out the level of responsibility. What was the actor thinking? What was going through their mind as they did the act that ultimately killed that person? And so we're looking at recklessness, intent, knowing action, or negligent action. And it's clear that this is somewhere between reckless and negligent, and therefore he is liable. And how much punishment? I don't want to see him go to prison. We don't have enough prison cells for all the people who truly deserve to be in prison for years. To tie up it's not going to serve any purpose whatsoever. It's not going to do anything but just actually act out, get a little retribution. And maybe he's responsible for bringing that part of it on. But I think they want a conviction. They want a scalp. I think they'll settle for anything at this point, but I don't think it's going to serve a purpose really to make anybody any safer in the world. But Hollywood does need to, and hopefully they have, come up with better safety protocols for handling firearms. People who are veterans, who they should hire is ex-military and ex-police law enforcement, because I remember, all they ever talked about was safety, 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 safety. It was drilled into your brain.
Mike, whether it's a movie set, whether it's a firearms range,
right,
whether it is personal gun safety is the same thing. You have to enact certain protocols to keep yourself and others safe. So because this is a movie set does not absolve them from basic firearms safety protocol. And that's what was missing here. And in addition, look, I know that from working as a NYPD sergeant, how movie companies try to cut corners in New York City. And one of the things I saw, the most egregious things I saw, movie sets will sometimes try to reserve an area overnight. So they have what's called a no parking detail.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually tow cars so that where they're going to shoot the next day will be clear of cars. And they're supposed to hire licensed security guards with state licenses. You know who these movie companies were hiring, Mike?
The local people who just walk around.
No, hiring homeless people to work security. Talk about, really? You can pay a star $10 million for this movie, but you're going to pay this guy cash $10 an hour who's not licensed? So look, when you see them doing something like that, what other shortcuts are they taking on this big budget movie, and they're going to pay someone $10 an hour to watch the cars overnight? I mean, just to me, that was like so Bush League. Really pay a licensed security guard $50 an hour like you're supposed to, and stop trying to save peanuts, for the lack of safety of others.
Yeah, just hire someone who's passed the state test, who's taken the state mandated training to be a security guard. That's all, whether they're armed or unarmed at that time, but just all you have to do. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science at all to provide for a safe set or, safe working conditions for people when there's going to be firearms involved on a day-to-day basis. It's not rocket science.
100% not. So, guys, to recap, Alec Baldwin has been indicted for the shooting of Helena Hutchins actually over 2 years ago on a movie set of the movie Rust in New Mexico. There's the picture of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the screen, a picture of Helena Hutchins with Alec Baldwin. The big problem, and I think one of the reasons that this case still has life to it and still has people interested in it is maybe, and it shouldn't really for this reason, but is the posture of Alec Baldwin, the lack of responsibility, the seemingly lack of remorse. I don't wish the guy any, ill will. I don't like the man. But that doesn't mean anything. I can see through that and see justice, and he deserves justice like everyone else. This was an accident. This 100% was an accident with negligence, right? Should he spend time in prison for this? I don't think so. Mike?
No, Billy, not at all. It doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever. But I think his intransience and reluctance to admit guilt to the public is brought him to this point. As much as I question what the heck the district attorneys are doing, in New Mexico, I got to question why he can't just come out and say, I'm very sorry for what I did, but I did it, and I'm sorry. I take responsibility, full responsibility for my actions. That's all he had to do. I think they want him to stand up in court and maybe in a plea bargain, admit guilt once and for all, so that they can feel satisfied and maybe the public too. But yeah, it's gone on way too long at this point. I hope it ends soon, and we move on from this. This is a waste of precious taxpayers' time prosecuting this guy. Let's just get this over with.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. Go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Not only is Joe a fantastic defense attorney, but a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. We really appreciate everything he does for this show and has done and will hopefully continue to do in the future. So, guys, just to recap, Alec Baldwin was indicted. In our opinion, from a police perspective, we don't think this case is going anywhere as far as the criminal prosecution. And the other thing, would people want to see Anna Gutierrez-Reed prosecuted? I mean, they use that term slippery slope. Yeah, was she negligent? Yeah, but something? They hired someone that wasn't qualified to be the armorer on a big motion picture. So again, does it come back to the Rust Movie Corporation? Joel Souza, movie producer, shot in the shoulder with a bullet that went to Helena Hutchins, who wound up dead, and he wound up shot. Is he also suing? I don't know. I would think he should sue too. He got shot, right? This gentleman here, David Halls, he's going to testify against Alec Baldwin. Again, we believe, and we have nothing to say about this, that this case shouldn't proceed criminally. The case should be dropped. I think a lot of people have suffered already. Let the civil cases move forward. Let it be settled with monetary settlements. I don't think sending someone to prison is going to solve or help anyone in this case. Mike, your final thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, I agree with you. It's not going to be justice for Hannah and that sort of thing. It's Helena. It's not going to be justice for her whatsoever, or her husband. Maybe he'll feel a little bit more like, okay, Alex is finally taking responsibility. But that's not going to bring back his wife and all that his family and her family have suffered through. So I hope this ends soon. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today and listening to our analysis of this case.
I think you did an excellent job today, Mike. We brought some little video back from a blast from the past before we even put you on this show.
Wow, well, that's an old one.
It's great to have you. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in on this Saturday. If you're in this country and you're a football fan, there's a lot of great football games on today. Have a great day, everyone, and stay warm, and we'll see you the next time.
Good
night. One episode just ain't enough.